The gunshot echoed across the valley like thunder. Victor Ashford stumbled backward, blood seeping between his fingers, staring at the woman he had once called his property. Clara lowered the pistol, her voice steady as stone. The next one will not miss. She had come to Arizona broken and afraid, a mail-order bride answering a letter written by a 4-year-old boy. This is her story. 3 days from now, she would stand before the entire town and declare that she belonged here, so. But right now, stepping off the train in Copper Springs, Arizona, Clara Whitmore had only one thought echoing through her mind. This was the last place on earth anyone would ever find her. She was wrong. The summer sun pressed down on the land like a punishment from heaven itself. Heat bent the air above the dirt tracks, creating shimmering waves that made everything beyond 20 feet look like a fever dream. Dust floated thick and still clinging to skin to clothes to every desperate breath Clara took as she stood on the wooden platform. Her dress had once been a soft cornflower blue. Now it was gray with coal smoke and 2 weeks of travel. The hem was frayed, her gloves were smudged with soot. Her boots were worn so thin she could feel every splinter in the wooden planks beneath her feet. But she stood straight, her chin lifted, her hand pressed against the letter tucked close to her heart. The train station was little more than a shack with a sign that had seen better decades. The wood creaked and groaned in the heat like an old man settling into his final rest. Around her, men crowded near the platform. Cowboys with sun-weathered faces, miners with coal dust permanently embedded in the lines of their skin, drifters with hungry eyes and hungrier intentions. They all turned to look at her. Clara felt their gazes like hands on her skin, some curious, some predatory, all measuring. A pair of men near their freight crates looked her over slowly. One gave a rough laugh and nudged the other with his whiskey bottle. She heard what he muttered. Something about a mail-order bride walking into trouble she did not understand. Something worse after that. Words that would have made her flinch 6 months ago. She did not flinch now. She had learned not to. The only women nearby leaned against the saloon porch across the street. Tight corsets, painted faces, eyes that had seen too much and expected nothing good. One of them met Clara's gaze and held it for a moment. There was no mockery there, only warning, only pity. Then she turned away. Clara scanned the platform. She was looking for a man holding a sign. A hat tipped her way. Anyone who looked like they might be expecting a woman from Boston who had answered a letter promising a new life. No one stepped forward. The crowd began to disperse. The other passengers from the train had already scattered. A prospector with tired eyes shuffled toward the assay office. A traveling salesman hauled his sample cases toward the general store. 2 railroad workers headed for the saloon without a backward glance. Clara stood alone. The letter in her pocket felt heavier than it should. She had read it so many times the paper was soft as cloth. The words were burned into her memory. My pa is real sad. He does not smile anymore. Mama went to heaven and Pa forgot how to smile. I think he needs someone who can smile real big. If you come, maybe he will smile again. I will be good. I know how to work. It was signed Ethan Brennan, Brennan Ranch, Copper Springs, Arizona. The handwriting was crooked and childish. The spelling was wrong in places, but something in those simple words had reached through all her fear and desperation and grabbed hold of her heart. A child had written this letter, a lonely child trying to save his father the only way he knew how. And Clara had come, not because she wanted to marry a stranger, not because she dreamed of life on a dusty ranch in the middle of nowhere. She had come because she needed to disappear, and because a child's innocent plea had given her something she had not felt in 2 years, hope. But now standing on this platform, with the Arizona sun beating down and no one coming forward to claim her, that hope was beginning to crack. Then a voice came from behind her, low, careful, rough as sandpaper on raw wood. Clara Whitmore. She turned. The man standing there was tall, broad-shouldered, built like the land itself, hard, weathered, silent. His face was tanned dark by years under the sun, the lines around his eyes deep as canyon walls. His coat was dusty, his boots were scuffed, his hat shaded eyes the color of storm clouds over mountains. He was not handsome in any traditional sense. His features were too rough for that, too carved by wind and work and something that looked very much like grief. But there was something about him that made Clara's breath catch, something solid, something real. His gaze met hers and held there longer than polite. He was studying her, measuring her the same way the other men had, but different somehow. Not with hunger, with something closer to confusion. When he spoke again, his voice was flat as the desert horizon. I am Silas Brennan, and I need to make something clear. Clara waited. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her face still. I never sent for a mail-order bride. The words landed like stones dropped into still water, ripples spreading outward. Around them, Clara became aware of the crowd that had not dispersed after all. They had only pulled back, watching, waiting for the show. Whispers started immediately. Well now, the bride got herself rejected right at the station. Wonder what she did to deserve that. Probably damaged goods. Why else would a woman come all this way alone? Clara heard every word. She felt the blood rushing to her face. Shame and anger and fear all tangled together in her chest until she could barely breathe. But she did not crumble. She had crumbled before. She had let a man see her weakness, and he had used it to destroy her piece by piece. She would not make that mistake again. Slowly, deliberately, she reached into her pocket. She pulled out the letter. The paper was soft from handling the creases worn almost through. She did not wave it accusingly. She did not thrust it at him like a weapon. She simply held it up where he could see. Then she spoke, clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. You can send me back. The whispers stopped. I came here in good faith, based on a letter with your name signed at the bottom. If this was a mistake, I will leave. But I am not a fraud. I am not here to trick anyone, and I do not need anyone's pity. Silas Brennan stared at her. Something flickered in those storm-gray eyes. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. Before he could respond, another voice cut through the tension, small and high, and trembling with emotion. Miss Clara. A boy stepped out from behind a wagon at the edge of the platform. He could not have been more than 4 years old. Golden curls stuck out beneath a crooked cap that was too big for his head. His boots were scuffed and dusty. His shirt was clean but mended in places. His cheeks were red from the heat and something else. Something that looked like desperate hope. He did not run to her. He walked, slowly, carefully, like a child approaching something precious that might break if he moved too fast. He walked until he stood in front of Clara. Then he turned and faced the crowd. His small body squared, his arms stiff at his sides, his chin lifted in an exact mirror of the man behind him. He looked like he was ready to fight the whole world if he had to. Miss Clara is my guest, he said. His voice shook but did not break. I invited her. Silas Brennan went completely still. Ethan, he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. I wrote the letter, the boy continued. He did not let his father interrupt. I wrote it because Pa is so sad all the time. He does not smile anymore. Not since Mama went away. I thought maybe if someone came who could smile real big, then Pa would remember how. Silence, complete and absolute silence. The men who had been snickering moments before were quiet now. The women on the saloon porch had stopped their whispering. Even the horses tied to the hitching post seemed to have stilled. Everyone was looking at the small boy who had just confessed to changing all their lives with a few crooked words on a piece of paper. Clara felt her throat tighten. She looked at Ethan, really looked at him, at the hope in his blue eyes, at the fear that she would be angry, at the love for his father that had driven him to do something this brave and this impossible. She knelt down until she was at his level. Ethan, she said softly, I am not angry. That letter was the most beautiful letter I have ever received. The boy's eyes went wide. Really, really. Behind them, Silas Brennan slowly lowered himself until he was kneeling too. His weathered face had cracked somehow. The hard lines around his mouth had softened. There was something in his expression that Clara could not quite name. Pain and pride and a grief so deep it had no bottom. He looked at his son for a long moment. Then he looked at Clara. When he stood again, he turned to face the crowd. His voice carried across the platform like thunder rolling over the mesa. My son chose her. I accept that choice. No one spoke. No one laughed. No one dared. In Copper Springs, when a man spoke like that, it meant something. It did not mean love. It did not mean welcome. But it meant she would not be thrown back on the next train like unwanted freight. For now, that was enough. The crowd began to disperse for real this time. The show was over. Or perhaps it was just beginning. Clara could feel the weight of their stares even as they walked away. She could hear the whispers starting up again, softer now, but no less sharp. She would be the talk of Copper Springs by nightfall, the mail-order bride who got rejected on the platform, the woman who was saved by a 4-year-old boy, the stranger who had somehow gotten herself tangled up with silent Silas Brennan. Let them talk. She had survived worse. Silas turned to her. His face was unreadable again. Whatever crack had appeared when he looked at his son had sealed itself back up. "There is a room above the saloon," he said. His voice was flat, businesslike. "It is not ideal for a woman alone, but it is the only place available right now. I will pay for it until we figure out what to do next." Clara nodded. She did not argue. She did not thank him effusively. She simply said, "I appreciate that." Something flickered in his eyes again. Surprise, maybe. He had expected her to protest, to demand better, to cry. She did none of those things. "Come on, then," he said. He turned and began walking toward the town proper without checking to see if she followed. Clara looked down at Ethan. The boy was still standing there, watching her with those wide blue eyes. She held out her hand. He took it. And together they followed Silas Brennan into Copper Springs. The room above the saloon was small and spare, a narrow bed with a thin mattress, a washstand with a chipped basin, a single window that looked out over the main street. The walls were thin enough that Clara could hear every note of the piano below, every burst of laughter, every clinking glass. It smelled of dust and old tobacco and something sweeter underneath. Perfume, maybe? The ghost of whoever had stayed here before. Silas handed her the key without ceremony. "Lock your door at night," he said. "Do not open it for anyone." He paused as if he wanted to say something more. Then he simply nodded and turned to go. "Wait," he stopped. Clara looked at him, at this man who had not asked for her, who did not want her, who was letting her stay anyway because his 4-year-old son had decided she belonged. "Thank you," she said. "I know this is not what you expected." Silas was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally, "it is not." Then he was gone. Clara stood in the middle of the small room and listened to his boots descending the stairs. She listened to the noise from the saloon below. She listened to the sound of her own heart beating in her chest. She should be terrified. She was alone in a strange town with no money, no prospects, and a man who had made it clear he did not want her here. Everything she had was riding on the whim of a child and the grudging tolerance of his father. But for the first time in months, she did not feel afraid. She felt something else entirely. Something that might have been hope, or might have been the beginning of hope, a small green shoot pushing up through cracked, dry earth. She took the letter from her pocket, unfolded it carefully, read those crooked words one more time. "My pa's real sad. I think he needs someone who can smile real big." She looked out the window at the town of Copper Springs, at the dusty streets and the wooden buildings and the mountains rising purple in the distance. At this place that was as different from Boston as the moon was from the earth. "I am here now," she whispered to no one. "I might as well try." That night, Clara could not sleep. The noise from the saloon continued until well past midnight. Piano music and raucous laughter and the occasional crash of breaking glass. She lay on the thin mattress and stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about everything that could go wrong. Around 2 in the morning, the noise finally died down. The last drunk stumbled out into the street. The piano player stopped his endless plunking. Silence settled over Copper Springs like a blanket. Clara got up and went to the window. The street below was empty and dark. The moon hung low over the mountains, casting silver light across the dusty road. She could see the shapes of buildings. The general store, the blacksmith, the church steeple rising against the stars, and something else. A figure sitting on a bench beneath the overhang across the street. She pressed closer to the glass, squinting into the darkness. It was Silas. He was sitting perfectly still, his hat pulled low over his eyes. He might have been sleeping, but something in the set of his shoulders told her he was not. He was watching, waiting, guarding. Clara's throat tightened. He had not said he would stay. He had not promised anything. He had simply paid for her room and told her to lock her door and walked away, but he had not left. She stood at the window for a long time, watching him watch over her. This man she did not know, this stranger who owed her nothing. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her back to bed. She slept fitfully, dreaming of trains and letters and a little boy with eyes like the Arizona sky. When she woke at dawn, the first thing she did was go to the window. The bench was empty, but there was a wooden chair beside it now, pulled close, as if someone had sat there all night. Clara pressed her hand against the cool glass and felt something shift in her chest, something she did not yet have a name for. He had stayed. In Copper Springs, that meant something. 3 months earlier, Clara's life had been very different. She had been a school teacher in Boston, a respected one. The children loved her. The parents trusted her. She had a small apartment near the school and a routine that felt safe and predictable. And she had been engaged to Victor Ashford. Victor was everything a woman was supposed to want. Handsome, wealthy, charming in public. The son of a federal judge with connections that stretched from Boston to Washington. When he had proposed, everyone told Clara how lucky she was. She had believed them. At first. The first time Victor hit her, he apologized for an hour afterward. He bought her flowers. He swore it would never happen again. He said she had made him so angry that he had lost control, but he loved her, and it was her fault anyway for provoking him. She believed that too. The second time, there were no flowers, only silence. A silence that stretched for days until Clara began to wonder if she had imagined the whole thing. The third time, she stopped counting. Victor never left marks where anyone could see. He was too smart for that, too careful. He hit her in places covered by clothing. He grabbed her arms hard enough to bruise, but always above the elbow. He knew exactly how much pain he could inflict without leaving evidence. And he used other weapons too. Weapons that did not leave any marks at all. You are so stupid, Clara. No wonder you are still a school teacher. What man would want someone so pathetic? You should be grateful I am willing to marry you. Without me, you would die alone. She heard these words so often that she started to believe them. She began to see herself through Victor's eyes. Worthless, stupid, lucky to have anyone at all. The school was her only refuge. When she was teaching, she could forget. She could be the person she used to be. Confident, capable, kind. But even that was taken from her. One night, 6 months before she fled Boston, Clara came to the Ashford mansion unannounced. She had forgotten her gloves there the night before, and she needed them for church in the morning. The front door was unlocked. The servants were away. She let herself in and walked toward the parlor where she had left her gloves. That was when she heard it, a child's voice, crying, begging, "Please, sir, I am sorry. Please stop." Then a sound that made Clara's blood turn to ice, the crack of an open palm against tender flesh. She moved without thinking, pushed open the door to Victor's study, and saw him standing over a child. The girl could not have been more than 10, a servant's daughter perhaps, or a foundling taken in as cheap labor. Her dress was torn, her face was red and swollen from crying. Her arms were raised to protect her head from the blows raining down. Victor's face was twisted with rage. His hand was raised for another strike. When he saw Clara in the doorway, he froze. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the child's quiet sobbing. Then Victor smiled. That charming, handsome smile that had fooled everyone. "Clara, darling, this is not what it looks like." But Clara had seen. She had seen everything, and something inside her that had been broken for 2 years suddenly snapped back into place. She went to the police. She reported what she had witnessed. She gave a statement. She demanded that someone investigate. What she did not understand was that Victor's father was a federal judge, that the Ashfords had connections in every corner of the city, that the police chief played cards with Victor every Saturday night. The investigation was closed within a week. No evidence found, no charges filed. The child disappeared. Clara never learned what happened to her, and then the destruction began. The school dismissed Clara for conduct unbecoming a teacher. No other school would hire her. Rumors spread through Boston's social circles that she was unstable, hysterical, possibly mad. Her landlord evicted her. Her friends stopped calling. Victor made sure everyone knew that despite her accusations, he was willing to forgive her, to take her back, to marry her anyway. Because she belongs to me, he told anyone who would listen. She always has. She always will. Clara understood then what she was dealing with. Victor did not love her. He did not even want her. She was simply a possession, a thing he owned, and he would destroy her utterly before he would let her go. She had two choices: stay and be crushed, marry Victor and spend the rest of her life being beaten in private while smiling in public. Watch herself disappear piece by piece until there was nothing left. Or run. She chose to run. The mail-order bride advertisements were her only option, a way to travel far and fast and start over where no one knew her name. She answered a dozen letters before she received Ethan's. When she read those simple words in that crooked handwriting, something broke open in her chest. This was not a man looking for a servant or a bed warmer. This was a child looking for hope. She could give him that. She could give them both that. And so she had come to Arizona, running from Victor Ashford, running towards something she could not yet name. The morning after her arrival, Clara woke to pale light filtering through the thin curtains. Her body ached from the uncomfortable bed. Her mind ached from too little sleep. But she forced herself to rise. She washed her face in the chip basin, brushed the worst tangles from her hair, put on her cleanest dress, which was not very clean at all. Then she opened the door. The wooden chair was still there, on the landing outside her room, close enough to touch. She reached out and pressed her palm against the seat. It was warm. Someone had been sitting there, recently. Someone who had left before she woke. Clara stood there for a long moment, her hand on that warm wood, thinking about a man who stayed all night without being asked, who left before dawn so she would not feel obligated to thank him, who showed care through action when words seemed beyond him. She took a deep breath and walked down the stairs. The saloon was quiet in the morning light. A few men sat at the bar nursing coffee and whatever regrets they had earned the night before. They looked up when Clara appeared, but quickly looked away. News traveled fast in small towns. Everyone knew who she was by now, the mail-order bride who got rejected, the woman Silas Brennan was stuck with. Clara held her head high and walked out into the street. Copper Springs looked different in the daylight, smaller somehow, more tired. The buildings were weathered wood and peeling paint. The street was packed dirt that would turn to mud at the first rain. There was a general store, a blacksmith, a church, a bank that looked like it might blow over in a strong wind. And people. Everywhere she looked, people who stopped what they were doing to stare at her. Clara ignored them. She had somewhere to be. She walked to the edge of town where the proper buildings gave way to a sprawl of shacks and tents. This was the miners' camp, the poorest part of Copper Springs, home to the men who dug copper from the earth and the families who followed them into the dust. Children ran everywhere here, barefoot, dirty, too thin. They chased each other through the maze of makeshift shelters and stopped to stare at Clara with wide, curious eyes. She found what she was looking for at the edge of the camp. A ruined barn, 3 walls still standing. The roof collapsed in the middle. Weeds growing up through the cracked floor. It was perfect. A woman was tending a fire nearby, thin and worn and watching Clara with suspicious eyes. "Who are you?" the woman asked. "My name is Clara Whitmore. I used to be a teacher." The woman laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Teacher. There is no school here. No one cares about our children." Clara looked at the ruined barn, then back at the woman. "There will be," she said, "starting now." The woman stared at her for a long moment. Then she shook her head and went back to her fire, muttering about crazy women from the east. Clara rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She swept the floor with a branch until her arms ached. She dragged wooden crates from a refuse pile and arranged them in rows. She found flat stones and used charcoal from an old fire pit to write letters across their surfaces. A, B, C, D. Simple things, building blocks, the foundation of everything. The first day, no children came to learn. They gathered at a distance and watched her with curious eyes, but none of them ventured closer. The second day was the same. On the third day, Clara brought out the piece of paper she had been saving, the letter from Ethan. She held it up and began to read aloud, her voice carrying across the dusty camp. "My pa is real sad. He does not smile anymore." A few children crept closer. "Mama went to heaven and Pa forgot how to smile." Closer still. "I think he needs someone who can smile real big." A little girl appeared at the edge of the ruined barn, 6 years old maybe, ragged dress, hair that had not seen a brush in weeks, eyes bright with curiosity. "What is that?" the girl asked. "It is a letter," Clara said. "Someone wrote it to ask for help." "What is wrote?" Clara smiled. "Come inside," she said. "I will show you." The girl's name was Lily. She was the daughter of Martha, the suspicious woman by the fire. She had never held a pencil in her life. She did not know the difference between letters and numbers. She thought books were something only rich people had. By the end of that first lesson, she could write her name. Word spread. By the end of the week, Claire had 20 students. Children who had never been inside a real school, who had never been taught anything beyond survival, who looked at her like she was some kind of miracle. She was not a miracle. She was just a woman with nothing left to lose. But for the first time since leaving Boston, she felt like herself again. News of the school and the ruined barn reached Silas Brennan on a Tuesday evening. He was mending a fence on the far side of his property when his foreman mentioned it in passing. That woman from the train, she has set up some kind of school in the miners' camp, teaching the children to read. Silas did not respond. He just kept hammering nails into wood, his face as unreadable as ever. But that night, after Ethan was asleep, he saddled his horse and rode to the edge of the miners' camp. He did not go in. He just sat there in the shadows watching. Clara was still in the ruined barn. Lantern light spilled through the gaps in the walls, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. Through those gaps, he could see her, kneeling beside a small boy, guiding his hand across a slate, her voice patient and encouraging. "That is it. You have got it. See, you wrote your name." The boy's face lit up like sunrise over the mountains. Silas watched for a long time. He watched Clara praise each child's small victories. He watched her wipe dirty faces with a clean cloth. He watched her share the last of her own food with a hungry little girl. She was not what he expected. He had expected a city woman, soft and helpless and full of complaints about the heat and the dust and the primitive conditions. He had expected someone who would demand to be sent home on the next train. Instead, he had gotten this: a woman who rolled up her sleeves and built something from nothing, who did not wait to be saved, who found her own way to matter. He thought about Elizabeth, his wife, dead 2 years now. She had been gentle and kind and utterly unsuited to this harsh land. She had tried so hard to love it here, tried so hard to be happy. But the loneliness had worn her down, and when complications took her during childbirth, she had slipped away like water through his fingers. He had not been there when she needed him most. He had been in the far pasture checking on the cattle during a storm. By the time he got back, she was gone. The scar on his hand throbbed. He had gotten it that night. Falling from his horse in his desperate race home, the rocks had sliced his palm open to the bone. He barely felt it. He felt it now, every time he looked at it. Clara was nothing like Elizabeth. Where Elizabeth had been soft, Clara was steel. Where Elizabeth had needed protection, Clara protected others. Where Elizabeth had wilted under the harsh Arizona sun, Clara seemed to draw strength from it. He did not know what to do with that. He did not know what to do with any of this. So he did what he always did. He turned his horse around and rode home in silence. But something had shifted, something he could not name. And he knew with the certainty of a man who had learned to read weather in the sky and trouble in the wind that his life was never going to be the same. The letter arrived at the telegraph office on a Thursday. The operator, a thin man named Wilkins, read it twice before he sealed it in an envelope and tucked it in his desk drawer. He had been told to watch for anything concerning certain names, to report anything suspicious. Victor Ashford paid well for information. Wilkins waited until nightfall. Then he wrote his own message on the telegraph and tapped it out into the darkness. Target located, Copper Springs, Arizona. She appears to have settled in with a local rancher named Brennan, awaiting instructions. The response came within the hour. Hold position, gather information. I am coming. Wilkins smiled and tucked the messages away. In the room above the saloon, Clara slept deeply for the first time in months. She dreamed of children learning to write their names, of a small boy with golden curls who had believed she could make his father smile again, of a man with storm-gray eyes who watched over her without being asked. She did not know that somewhere in Boston, a man with cold eyes and a colder heart was already booking passage on a westbound train. She did not know that the walls she had built around her new life were about to be tested. She only knew that for the first time in 2 years she felt something like peace. It would not last. But for now, in this moment, it was enough. The town council meeting was held on a Tuesday morning, 1 week after Clara arrived in Copper Springs. The courthouse was a single-room building with cracked windows and benches worn smooth by decades of waiting bodies. It smelled of dust and tobacco and the particular kind of sweat that comes from men who work under the Arizona sun. By 9 o'clock, every seat was filled. Those who could not find seats stood along the walls pressed shoulder to shoulder, fanning themselves against the heat. Clara sat alone at the front. Her hands gripped the edge of her chair so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. But her back was straight, her chin was lifted. She would not let them see her tremble. Behind her, she could feel the weight of dozens of eyes. Curious eyes, hostile eyes, a few that might have held something like sympathy. She did not turn to look. She kept her gaze fixed on the table at the front of the room where the council members were taking their seats. Harold Webb, the bank president, sat in the center. He was a thin man with a sour face and the kind of eyes that calculated everything in terms of profit and loss. The other council members flanked him. The owner of the general store, a cattle rancher with land stretching to the horizon, the minister who looked uncomfortable being there at all. Webb picked up the letter from the table. Ethan's letter. Clara recognized the soft-worn paper even from a distance. This document, Webb said, his voice carrying easily through the crowded room, is what brought Miss Whitmore to our town. A letter written under the name of Silas Brennan, inviting her to come as a mail-order bride. He unfolded it slowly, making a show of smoothing the creases. Then he began to read aloud. My pa is real sad. He does not smile anymore. Mama went to heaven and Pa forgot how to smile. I think he needs someone who can smile real big. If you come, maybe he will smile again. A ripple of sound moved through the room. Some people laughed quietly, quickly stifled. Others shifted in their seats. A few women whispered behind their fans. Webb folded the letter again with precise movements. A woman summoned under false pretenses causes unrest in a community, he said. It raises questions of deception, of fraud. We must determine whether Miss Whitmore came here with honest intentions or whether she is attempting to take advantage of a grieving widower and his child. Clara felt the words like blows. She wanted to stand up and shout that she was the victim here, not the perpetrator, that she had come in good faith based on a letter she believed was genuine, that she had never asked Silas Brennan for anything except the chance to start over. But she knew how these things worked. She had learned in Boston that the truth mattered less than perception, that a woman alone was always suspect, that the powerful could shape reality to suit their purposes. So she sat still and waited. Outside the window, a small face appeared. Ethan stood on his toes, hands pressed to the glass. His breath fogged the corner of the pane as he watched. Clara did not turn, but she felt him there, a small presence radiating worry and hope in equal measure. The council called witnesses. The station master described Clara's arrival. The owner of the saloon confirmed she had been staying in one of his rooms. A woman from town testified that Clara had been seen walking to the miners' camp every day, doing heaven knows what with those people's children. Each word added another stone to the wall being built around Clara. Each testimony painted her as an outsider, an interloper, a problem to be solved. Then Harold Webb turned to face the room. We would like to hear from Mr. Brennan, he said, as the man whose name appears on this letter. Silas stood. He had been sitting in the corner apart from the crowd. His hat was in his hands, turning slowly between his fingers. His face was as unreadable as ever, carved from the same stone as the mountains on the horizon. He walked to the front of the room. His boots struck the wooden floor with slow, deliberate steps. He did not look at Clara. He did not look at anyone. He simply stopped at the table and placed his hand on the letter. This letter bears my name, he said. His voice was low, but it carried to every corner of the room. That means the responsibility is mine. Webb leaned forward. You admit to sending for this woman under false pretenses. Silas was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his words were careful, measured. I admit that a letter with my name went out. I admit that Miss Whitmore came here believing she was answering an honest invitation. She traveled thousands of miles in good faith. She deserves better than to be treated like a criminal for trusting that letter. But you did not write it, another council member pressed. Your son did, a 4-year-old child. My son acted out of love, Silas said. There was something in his voice now, something that had not been there before. He saw his father suffering, and he tried to help the only way he knew how. I will not condemn him for that. Webb exchanged glances with the other council members. The question remains, Webb said what to do about Miss Whitmore. She came here expecting a husband. She has no resources, no family, no means of supporting herself. She cannot simply remain in limbo indefinitely. She can remain as long as she chooses. Every head in the room turned towards Silas. He stood straighter. His jaw was tight. His eyes met Webb's without flinching. Miss Whitmore came here because my name was on that letter. That makes her my responsibility. I will pay whatever fine the council sees fit. I will accept whatever penalty you decide is appropriate. But she stays. That is not negotiable. The room erupted in whispers. This was not what anyone had expected. Silas Brennan, the silent widower who had barely spoken to anyone in 2 years, was standing up in front of the whole town and claiming responsibility for a woman he had never asked for. Webb conferred with the other council members in low voices. Clara watched them, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She watched Silas standing there, solid as bedrock, refusing to back down. He was not doing this for love. She knew that. He barely knew her. But he was doing it anyway, taking on a burden he did not have to carry, accepting consequences he did not deserve. Why the council reached their decision? A fine of $200, Webb announced, and Mr. Brennan will be barred from participating in the cattle auctions for 6 months. A gasp went through the crowd. $200 was a fortune, and cattle season was about to begin. 6 months without being able to sell his herd could break a ranch. Clara turned to look at Silas. She expected to see anger, resentment, some sign that he blamed her for this disaster. Instead, she saw only acceptance. I agree to those terms, he said quietly. Webb nodded slowly. Then this matter is closed. Miss Whitmore may remain in Copper Springs, but she would do well to remember that she is here on sufferance, not by right. The meeting was adjourned. People filed out slowly, still whispering among themselves. Clara sat frozen in her chair, unable to move, unable to process what had just happened. Silas walked past her without a word. His boots echoed on the wooden floor as he headed for the door. She should thank him. She should say something, but her throat was tight and her eyes were stinging, and she did not trust her voice. Then a small hand slipped into hers. Ethan had come inside while she was not looking. He stood beside her chair, his blue eyes solemn. Pa is not angry at you, he said quietly. He is angry at himself. He thinks he should have known what I did. He thinks he should have protected you better. Clara looked down at the who had started all of this, the boy who had written a letter with his whole heart and changed 3 lives forever. Your father is a good man, she said. Ethan nodded seriously. I know. That is why I wanted you to come. After the trial, Clara did not return to her room above the saloon. She walked out of town past the last buildings, past the miners' camp, until she found a ridge overlooking the valley below. She sat down on a flat rock, still warm from the morning sun, and stared out at the endless Arizona sky. She had cost Silas Brennan $200 in 6 months of income. She had disrupted his life, damaged his reputation, and given the town gossips enough material to last for years. All because she had been desperate enough to answer a letter from a child. Maybe she should leave, find her way to another town, another territory, another chance to start over. She had done it before, she could do it again. But even as she thought it, she knew she would not go. Not because of Silas, not even because of Ethan, because of those children in the miners' camp, the ones who had never held a pencil before, the ones who were learning to write their names for the first time, the ones who looked at her like she was the first person who had ever believed they could be something more than what they were born to. She could not abandon them. Not now, not when she was finally doing something that mattered. Clara stood up and brushed the dust from her skirt. If she was going to stay, she would stay on her own terms. She would not be a burden. She would not be a charity case. She would find a way to earn her place in this town even if the town did not want her. She walked back toward the miners' camp. The school needed walls. It needed a roof. It needed books and slates and proper benches for the children to sit on. Clara could not provide any of those things, but she could provide something else. Hope. And sometimes hope was enough to build on. The children came every morning now, 23 of them, ranging in age from 5 to 12. They came with dirty faces and empty stomachs and eyes hungry for something they could not name. They came because Clara was there, because she treated them like they mattered, because she saw possibilities in them that no one else had ever bothered to look for. Lily was her star pupil. The little girl who had been first through the door had a mind like quicksilver, grasping concepts faster than Clara could teach them. Within 2 weeks, she was reading simple sentences. Within 3, she was helping the younger children with their letters. The ruined barn had been transformed. Clara had patched the worst holes in the walls with salvaged boards. She had dragged in more crates for seating. She had convinced the owner of the general store to donate a cracked chalkboard that he was going to throw away. It was not much, but it was a school, a real school. Word spread beyond the miners' camp. A few children from town began appearing at the edge of the property, watching with curious eyes. Clara invited them in. Some ran away, others stayed. By the end of the first month, her class had grown to 30 students. Martha, the suspicious woman who had laughed at Clara that first day, now brought her coffee each morning. Strong and bitter, the way the miners' wives made it. She never said thank you, but the coffee said it for her. Clara was so busy with the school that she barely noticed the other changes happening around her. She did not notice when Silas began riding past the miners' camp each evening, pausing at the ridge to watch the lantern light in the ruined barn. She did not notice when he started leaving small things at her door. A bundle of candles, a packet of pencils, a warm blanket when the nights turned cold. She did not notice the way his eyes followed her when she walked through town, or the way he found reasons to be wherever she happened to be. But other people noticed. The town noticed everything. Silas Brennan had not spoken more than a dozen words to anyone since his wife died. He had closed himself off, retreated into his work and his grief. The people of Copper Springs had long since given up trying to reach him. Now suddenly he was different. Not obviously different. He was still silent, still stoic, still carved from the same hard stone as the Arizona mountains. But there was something in his eyes that had not been there before, a spark of life where there had been only ashes. And everyone knew who had put it there. The gossip spread like wildfire through dry brush. Some said Clara had bewitched him. Some said she was after his land. Some said Silas was a fool for taking in a strange woman with a mysterious past. But a few people saw the truth. They saw a lonely man learning to feel again, and a broken woman learning to stand on her own feet. Whatever was happening between Silas Brennan and Clara Whitmore, it was something rare, something worth watching, something that could either save them both or destroy them entirely. On a night when thunder rolled across the mountains, Clara heard a knock on her door. She was staying in a small room behind the church now. The minister had offered it when he learned she was still living above the saloon. It was not much. 4 walls, a narrow bed, a single window. But it was quiet, and it was respectable, and it was hers. The knock came again. Urgent. Clara wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and opened the door. Silas stood in the rain. Water streamed from the brim of his hat and soaked through his coat. His face was grim in the lantern light. "Someone has been asking about you," he said without preamble. "A man from back east. He has papers." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Victor. It had to be Victor. She had known this day would come. She had prayed it would not come so soon. But Victor Ashford was not a man who gave up easily. She was his property in his mind. He would hunt her to the ends of the earth if he had to. What kind of papers, she managed to ask. Silas shook his head. "I do not know yet, but the man is staying at the hotel. He has been asking questions all day. About you, about me, about how you came to be here." Clara leaned against the door frame. Her legs felt weak. "I should go," she said. "I should leave before he finds me. I have brought you enough trouble already." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Rain drummed on the roof above them. Thunder growled in the distance. Then he said something that changed everything. "Did you do what they say you did?" Clara looked up at him, at this man who had sacrificed so much for her already, who had every reason to send her away and no reason at all to let her stay. "No," she said. Her voice was steady now. "The only thing I did was tell the truth about a powerful man. I saw him beating a child, a little girl no older than Lily. I reported it to the police. What happened? His father is a federal judge. The investigation was buried. The child disappeared. And Victor decided that since I had humiliated him, he would destroy me. He got me fired from my job. He spread rumors that I was insane. He told everyone that I belonged to him and that no matter where I ran, he would bring me back. Silas listened without interrupting. His eyes never left her face. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "Come with me," he said. "You are not safe here tonight." Clara hesitated. Going with him would cause more gossip, more scandal, more ammunition for the people who already thought the worst of her. But staying here alone with Victor's man, prowling the town, was worse. She grabbed her coat and followed him into the rain. They rode through the storm to the Brennan Ranch. Clara had never been there before. She had seen it from a distance. A solid house of timber and stone set against the backdrop of the mountains. Corrals and outbuildings scattered across the property. A windmill turning slowly in the gusting wind. But seeing it up close was different. This was not just a ranch. It was a home. A real home with a porch that wrapped around three sides and windows that glowed warm with lantern light. The kind of home Clara had dreamed about as a child before she learned that dreams were dangerous things. Silas helped her down from the horse. His hands were strong and sturdy as they gripped her waist. For a moment they stood close enough that she could feel the heat of his body through the cold rain. Then he stepped back and led her inside. The house was warm and quiet. Ethan was already asleep in his room, watched over by an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, who came in to help when Silas needed to be away. Silas showed Clara to a small guest room near the back of the house. "You will be safe here," he said. "Lock the door. I will be just outside." Clara looked around the room. A narrow bed with a faded quilt, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, a window that looked out over the dark mountains. On the nightstand there was a small wooden box. She did not open it, but she noticed the way Silas's eyes lingered on it for just a moment before he turned away. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You do not owe me anything. You did not ask for any of this." Silas stopped at the door. He did not turn around. "My wife died giving birth to our son," he said quietly. "Before she passed, she made me promise something. She said, 'Do not let our boy grow up without love. Do not let grief turn you to stone.'" He was silent for a moment. "I broke that promise," he said. "For 2 years I let grief turn me to stone. I stopped feeling anything. I stopped being a father to my son. I just existed day after day waiting for something I could not name." He turned then. His gray eyes met hers. "Then you came, and my son started smiling again. And I started to remember what it felt like to care about something other than just surviving." Clara did not know what to say. "You did not save me," he continued, "and I am not saving you. But maybe we are both building something new. Something neither of us could build alone." He walked out and closed the door behind him. Clara stood in the middle of the small room, her heart pounding. She went to the window and looked out at the storm. Lightning flickered across the sky, illuminating the mountains in brief, brilliant flashes. She thought about Victor, somewhere out there hunting her. She thought about the children in her school depending on her. She thought about Ethan, who had written a letter with his whole heart. And she thought about Silas, who showed love through action because he had forgotten how to say the words. She was not safe. She might never be safe again. But for the first time in years, she was not alone. That had to count for something. The next morning, Clara woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen. Silas was already there, standing at the stove with his back to her. Ethan sat at the table, swinging his legs and watching his father with bright eyes. When Clara appeared in the doorway, Ethan's face lit up. "Miss Clara, you are still here," she smiled at him. "I am still here." "Pa made breakfast," Ethan said proudly. "He never makes breakfast. Miss Patterson always does it. But today he said he wanted to do it himself." Clara looked at Silas. He was focused on the pan in front of him, not meeting her eyes. "I hope you are hungry," he said gruffly. "I may have made too much." They ate together at the scarred wooden table. Ethan chattered about everything and nothing. The horses, the chickens, a lizard he had found behind the barn. Clara listened and laughed and felt something ease in her chest that had been tight for longer than she could remember. After breakfast, Silas took her outside. The storm had passed in the night, leaving the world washed clean. The sky was brilliant blue. The mountains glowed purple and gold in the early light. Everything smelled of fawn and wet earth and possibility. Silas led her to a small creek that ran along the edge of the property. An ancient oak tree stood beside it, its branches spreading wide. On the trunk, carved deep into the bark, was a heart with 2 letters inside. S plus E. Silas stood looking at it for a long moment. I carved that on our wedding day, he said. Elizabeth loved this spot. She said it was the most peaceful place she had ever found. Clara did not speak. She sensed that he needed to say this, that he had been holding these words inside for too long. She was not made for this life, Silas continued. She was from Virginia, gentle, soft. She tried so hard to love it here. But the loneliness wore her down. And when she died, I blamed myself. I thought if I had been a better husband, if I had loved her better, she would have been strong enough to survive. He turned to look at Clara. I have not spoken about her to anyone since the funeral, not even to Ethan. It hurt too much. But you asked about my scar, and something in me wanted you to know. My scar, Clara said quietly. Silas nodded. You showed me yours. I suppose I wanted you to see mine. They stood there in the morning light, two wounded people who had somehow found each other in the middle of the Arizona wilderness. Then Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A ring. Simple silver, worn thin with age. This was Elizabeth's, he said. When she died, I put it away. I thought I would never look at it again. But last night after you went to sleep, I took it out. Clara's heart was pounding. I am not asking you to replace her, Silas said. I am not asking you to be anyone other than who you are. But I want you to know that whatever comes next, whatever that man from the East tries to do, you have a place here. With me. With Ethan. For as long as you want it. He held out the ring. This is not a proposal. Not yet. It is a promise. That you are not alone anymore. Clara looked at the ring. At this man who spoke more through silence than most people did with 1,000 words. At the life he was offering her. A life she had never dared to dream about. She reached out and closed his fingers around the ring. Keep it safe for me, she said, until I have earned the right to wear it. Something shifted in Silas's eyes, something that might have been hope. How long, he asked. As long as it takes, Clara said, for both of us to be ready. He nodded slowly. Then he tucked the ring back into his pocket, and they walked back to the house together. Behind them, the oak tree stood sentinel over the creek, and inside its trunk, the carved heart held the promise of something new. 2 days later, Silas rode to the far pasture to check on the herd. When he came home that evening, Clara was waiting on the porch with news that made his blood run cold. Thunder is gone, she said quietly. The corral gate was open this morning, and he was not there. Silas went still. Thunder was his horse, the black stallion he had raised from a foal, the finest animal he had ever owned. It was Thunder who had carried him to the train station the day Clara arrived. It was Thunder who had stood patient and steady while his world shifted beneath him, worth more than everything else on the ranch combined. He walked to the corral without a word. The gate hung open, swinging slightly in the evening breeze. There were hoof prints in the dust leading away toward the road. But there were other prints too. Boot prints. A man's boots with a distinctive worn heel. Silas knelt and studied the tracks for a long moment. Then he stood and walked back to Clara. I need to tell you something, he said. What Thunder is not gone. I sold him. Clara stared at him. What do you mean you sold him? Silas's jaw was tight. The fine from the council, the 6 months without cattle sales, I did the calculations. There was no way to make it through the winter without selling something. Thunder was worth enough to cover the gap. Clara felt something twist in her chest. You sold your horse, she said slowly. Your prize horse. To pay for what I cost you. No, Silas shook his head. To pay for what my son's letter cost. This was never your fault, Clara. The debt was mine, and I paid it the only way I could. But Thunder was yours. You raised him from a foal. Silas was quiet for a moment. Then he said Elizabeth gave me Thunder as a wedding present. He was the last connection I had to her besides Ethan. For 2 years, I could not even look at him without thinking of her. He met her eyes. But some things are worth more than memories. My son's happiness, this ranch's survival, your safety. Those things matter more than a horse, no matter how much I loved him. Clara did not know what to say. This man had given up his most treasured possession. Not for love, not for romance, simply because it was the right thing to do. She had never known anyone like him. I will pay you back, she said fiercely. I do not know how yet, but I will find a way. Silas almost smiled. It was just a flicker at the corner of his mouth, barely visible, but it was there. You already have, he said. You brought my son back to life. You reminded me that there are things worth caring about. That is worth more than any horse. He turned and walked toward the barn. Clara watched him go, her heart full of something she could not name. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet. Victor's man had stopped asking questions. He had stopped appearing in the saloon and the general store. He had simply vanished like a snake sliding back into the grass. Clara knew better than to think he was gone. She knew Victor. She knew how he operated. He was not the kind of man who gave up. He was the kind who waited, who planned, who struck when his prey felt safe. She was not safe. She would never be safe as long as Victor Ashford drew breath. But she could not spend her life hiding. So she went back to teaching, back to her children in the ruined barn, back to the work that had given her purpose when everything else had been taken away. The school was thriving now. 40 students came every day. Clara had divided them into groups based on age and ability. The older children helped teach the younger ones. Lily, her star pupil, was now reading at a level that would have impressed teachers in Boston. The town had started to notice. Not everyone approved, of course. Some people muttered that educating minors' children was a waste of time, that Clara was giving those people ideas above their station, that no good could come from teaching the poor to read. But others saw something different. They saw children who had been running wild now sitting still and learning. They saw families who had been dismissed as worthless now sending their sons and daughters to school with clean faces and combed hair. They saw hope where there had been only despair. Sheriff Jenkins stopped by one afternoon, his badge glinting in the sun. "You have done something remarkable here, Miss Whitmore," he said, looking around at the makeshift classroom. "I never thought I would see the day when Mick O'Brien's boy could write his own name." Clara smiled. Every child deserves the chance to learn. Jenkins nodded slowly. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I have been watching you since you arrived. I know about the man from the East, the one asking questions." Clara's smile faded. "I do not know what you are running from." Jenkins continued, "And frankly, it is not my business. But I want you to know something. Whatever that man thinks he has on you, it does not matter here. In Arizona, we judge people by what they do, not by what someone else says about them. And what you have done speaks for itself." He tipped his hat and walked away. Clara stood in the doorway of her school watching him go. For the first time since leaving Boston, she felt like she might actually belong somewhere. The feeling did not last. 3 weeks after the storm, a carriage rolled into Copper Springs. Not just any carriage, a fine one. Polished black wood with brass fittings. 4 matched horses pulling it. The kind of carriage that had no business being in a dusty frontier town in the middle of Arizona. People stopped what they were doing to stare. The carriage pulled up in front of the hotel. A man stepped out. Clara was in the general store when she heard the commotion. She walked to the window and looked out, and felt her blood turn to ice. Victor Ashford stood in the middle of the street brushing dust from his tailored coat. He looked exactly as she remembered. Handsome, polished, expensive. Every inch the wealthy gentleman, and every inch the monster she knew him to be. He spoke to someone. Clara could not hear the words, but she saw him gesture toward the sheriff's office, toward the church, toward the road that led out to the Brennan Ranch. He was asking questions, gathering information, hunting. Clara backed away from the window. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. She had to warn Silas. She had to get to Ethan. She had to do something, anything, before Victor found them. But when she turned to run, she found her path blocked. A man stood in the doorway of the general store, tall and broad with cold eyes and a cruel smile. Harrison, Victor's personal enforcer, the man who did the dirty work that Victor's hands were too clean for. "Miss Whitmore," Harrison said pleasantly, "Mr. Ashford would very much like to speak with you." Clara looked around desperately. The store owner had retreated behind his counter, pretending not to see. The other customers had suddenly found reasons to be elsewhere. She was alone. "Tell Mr. Ashford," Clara said, her voice steadier than she felt, "that I have nothing to say to him." Harrison smiled. That was not a request. He stepped forward, reaching for her arm, and then a voice cut through the tension like a knife through silk. "I believe the lady said no." Silas Brennan stood in the doorway. He must have ridden straight from the ranch. Dust still clung to his boots and his coat. His face was grim and hard-carved from the same stone as the mountains on the horizon. His hand rested on the grip of the pistol at his hip. Harrison froze. He was a bully, but he was not a fool. He could see the look in Silas's eyes, the look of a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. "This is none of your concern," Rancher Harrison said carefully. "The lady is with me," Silas replied. "That makes it my concern." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. The air in the store felt thick enough to cut. Then Harrison smiled that cold smile again. "Very well," he said. "Mr. Ashford will be in touch." He tipped his hat mockingly and walked out. Clara let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Silas crossed to her in two long strides. His hands cupped her face, tilting it up to look at her. "Are you hurt?" "No," she whispered. "No, I am fine." His eyes searched hers. Whatever he saw there made his jaw tighten. "It is time," he said. "Time for you to come home." Home. Such a simple word. Such an impossible word. "I am not your burden," Clara said. "You are my choice." Silas's voice was firm. "You have been my choice since the moment my son decided you belonged with us. I should have said it sooner. I should have done a lot of things sooner. But I am saying it now." He took her hand. "Come home, Clara. Let me stand with you against whatever comes next." She looked at this man who had shown her kindness when she expected none, who had sacrificed for her without being asked, who had opened his wounded heart just wide enough to let her in. She thought about Victor, circling like a vulture. She thought about Ethan waiting at the ranch with his hopeful blue eyes. She thought about the school and the children and the life she was building from nothing. And she made her choice. "Yes," she said, "take me home." That night, Clara stood in the doorway of the ranch house and watched the sunset behind the mountains. She was home, not because Silas had brought her here, not because she had nowhere else to go, because she had chosen this, chosen him, chosen Ethan, chosen this wild, harsh, beautiful land that demanded everything and gave nothing easily. Inside the house, Ethan was helping set the table for dinner. She could hear his voice chattering about his day, about the horses, about the letter he was learning to write to send to his grandmother in Virginia. Silas came to stand beside her. He did not speak. He did not need to. His presence said everything. "Victor will not stop," Clara said quietly. "He never stops. I know he has money, power, connections. He could destroy everything we have built. He could try." Clara turned to look at him. His profile was sharp against the fading light, strong, unyielding. "Why are you not afraid?" she asked. Silas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I spent 2 years being afraid. Afraid of feeling, afraid of living, afraid of loving anything that could be taken from me." He turned to face her. "I am done being afraid. Whatever Victor Ashford brings to our door, we will face it together. And whatever happens, at least I will know that I stood for something, that I protected the people I care about." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "When did you start caring about me?" she whispered. Silas almost smiled, that slight flicker at the corner of his mouth. "The moment you stood on that platform and told the whole town that you would not beg for pity," he said. "I knew then that you were something rare, something worth fighting for." He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I am not good with words, Clara. I never have been. But I need you to know something. Whatever comes next, whatever that man tries to do, you are not alone anymore. You have Ethan, you have this ranch, and you have me." He paused. "For as long as you want us." Clara looked at this man who had suffered so much and still found the strength to open his heart again. She rose on her toes and pressed a kiss to his cheek. "Forever," she said softly. "I want you forever." In the distance, thunder rolled across the mountains. A storm was coming. But for the first time in her life, Clara was ready to face it. She was home. She was loved. She was not alone. And that made all the difference. Victor Ashford did not wait long to make his move. 3 days after his arrival in Copper Springs, he requested a formal meeting with the town council. He came dressed in his finest suit, his hair pomaded, his boots polished to a mirror shine. He brought documents. He brought witnesses. He brought the full weight of his family's influence, wrapped in expensive paper and sealed with red wax. The courthouse was packed again. Standing room only. Everyone in town wanted to see what the wealthy stranger from Boston had to say about the school teacher who had captured their attention. Clara sat in the front row. Silas sat beside her, his hand resting on her knee beneath the folds of her skirt. A small gesture. A private one. but it anchored her when she felt like she might float away on a tide of fear. Victor stood at the front of the room, every inch the aggrieved gentleman. "Ladies and gentlemen of Copper Springs," he began, his voice smooth as honey poured over broken glass. "I come before you today, not as an accuser, but as a concerned citizen, a man who has traveled thousands of miles to right a terrible wrong." He paused for effect. "Clara Whitmore is my fiancée. She fled our home in Boston 6 months ago, taking with her certain valuables belonging to my family. I have come to bring her back where she belongs." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Victor placed his documents on the table. Betrothal papers. A bill of sale for jewelry that Clara had never seen. A sworn statement from a Boston physician claiming that Clara suffered from hysteria and delusions. All lies, all carefully constructed, all bearing the seal of Judge Ashford's court. "This woman," Victor continued, gesturing toward a Clara, "is not well. She requires care and supervision that only I can provide. I ask this council to release her into my custody so that I may return her to Boston for proper treatment." Clara felt Silas tense beside her. She stood. The room fell silent. "May I speak?" she asked quietly. Harold Webb looked uncomfortable, but he nodded. Clara walked to the front of the room. She did not look at Victor. She looked at the faces of the people who had watched her build a school from nothing, who had seen her teach their children to read, who knew her not by reputation, but by action. "Everything this man has said is a lie," she said clearly. "I am not his fiancée. I broke our engagement 2 years ago when I witnessed him beating a child in his household. I reported what I saw to the police. His father, the judge, buried the investigation. The child disappeared," gasped from the crowd. Victor's face twisted with barely controlled rage. "She is delusional," he said sharply. "This is exactly what I warned you about. She invents stories. She sees things that are not there." Clara continued as if he had not spoken. "He destroyed my career. He spread lies about me. He made it impossible for me to find work or shelter in Boston. I came to Arizona to escape him, to start a new life. And I have built that life here with my own hands. I have harmed no one. I have taken nothing that was not mine." She turned to face Victor directly. "You do not own me, you never did, and you never will." Victor's mask slipped. For just a moment, Clara saw the monster beneath the gentleman's facade, the cold, calculating cruelty that he hid so well from the world. Then he smiled, that charming, handsome smile that had fooled everyone. "This is exactly the kind of hysteria I mentioned," he said smoothly. "She cannot help herself. She truly believes these fantasies." He turned to the council. "I have a court order from the Federal District of Massachusetts, signed by Judge Ashford, authorizing me to take Miss Whitmore into custody for her own protection. I trust you will honor the authority of the federal courts." Webb looked at the document. His face was troubled. "This appears to be in order," he said slowly. Clara felt her heart sink. Then the door opened. A man walked in, middle-aged, weather-worn, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He wore a badge on his chest that gleamed in the sunlight streaming through the windows. "I am Samuel Gray," he said, "federal investigator. I have been sent to look into certain allegations regarding this matter." Victor's smile faltered. "What allegations?" he demanded. Gray walked to the front of the room with unhurried steps. "Allegations of fraud," he said, "abuse of judicial authority, falsification of documents, and assault on a minor child." He placed his own set of papers on the table. "I have been investigating Victor Ashford for 3 months," he continued. "The investigation began in Boston after Miss Whitmore's original complaint was quietly reopened by honest officers who disagreed with how it was handled. It seems the child she tried to protect did not disappear after all. She was hidden by sympathetic servants, and she has given a sworn statement detailing exactly what Mr. Ashford did to her." The room erupted. Victor's face went pale. "This is outrageous," he sputtered. "This is a conspiracy. My father will hear about this." "Your father," Gray said calmly, "has already heard about it. He resigned from the bench this morning just ahead of impeachment proceedings. It seems you are not the only skeleton in the Ashford family closet, Mr. Ashford." Victor looked around the room, at the faces that had been neutral moments before now turned hostile, at the sheriff moving to block the door, at Clara standing tall and unafraid. For the first time in his life, Victor Ashford had nowhere to run. "This is not over," he hissed at Clara. "You will regret this." Gray nodded to the sheriff. "Mr. Ashford, you are under arrest for assault, fraud, and obstruction of justice. You will be transported to Tucson to await trial." Two deputies moved forward and took Victor by the arms. He struggled. He cursed. He made threats that echoed off the courthouse walls. But it did not matter. As they dragged him toward the door, Clara finally allowed herself to breathe. It was over, or so she thought. Victor escaped that night. No one knew exactly how it happened. The deputies were found unconscious in an alley behind the jail. The cell door was standing open. Victor and two of his men had vanished into the darkness. Sheriff Jenkins rode out to the Brennan Ranch at dawn to deliver the news. Clara stood on the porch listening to his words, feeling the fragile peace she had built crumbling around her. "He will come for me," she said quietly. "He will never stop." Jenkins nodded grimly. "I have sent word to the territorial marshal. There will be men searching for him, but until he is caught, you need to be careful." After the sheriff left, Silas found Clara in the kitchen. She was standing at the window staring out at the mountains, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. He did not speak. He simply stood beside her, a solid presence in the uncertain morning light. "I should leave," Clara said finally. "If I go, he will follow me. You and Ethan will be safe." "No," Clara turned to look at him. Silas's face was hard, determined. "You are not running anymore," he said. "We face this together, whatever comes. He could kill you. He could kill Ethan. He could try." Silas's voice was flat as the desert horizon. "But I have faced worse than a pampered rich man with a grudge, and I will not let fear drive the people I love away from their home. The people you love." Silas met her eyes. In their gray depths, she saw something she had not seen before. Something unguarded, vulnerable. "I love you, Clara. I have loved you since the moment you stood on that platform and refused to break. I should have said it sooner. I should have said a lot of things sooner. But I am saying it now." He took her hands in his. "Stay. Fight. Let me stand beside you." Clara looked at this man who had lost so much and still found the courage to love again. And she made her choice. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." The days that followed were tense. Silas posted guards around the ranch. Every afternoon, he took Clara behind the barn and taught her how to shoot. She was a quick learner. By the third day, she could hit a tin can at 30 paces. By the fifth, she could do it without flinching at the sound. He kept Ethan close, never letting the boy out of his sight. Clara continued teaching at her school, but she carried a pistol now hidden in the folds of her skirt. The children did not know. Their parents did. No one objected. The town of Copper Springs had closed ranks around her. It happened slowly, quietly, without fanfare or announcement. The miners' wives started taking turns walking Clara to and from the school. The shopkeepers kept their eyes open for strangers. The ranchers made sure someone was always watching the roads. These were not people who had welcomed Clara when she arrived. Many of them had whispered about her, judged her, wished she would leave. But she had earned their respect, not through words, through action, through building a school where there was none, through teaching their children when no one else cared. And now, when she needed them, they stood with her. On the fifth night after Victor's escape, Clara could not sleep. She lay in the darkness of her room at the ranch house, listening to the wind moving through the cottonwood trees outside. Every creak of the old house made her heart jump. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Finally, she gave up on sleep and went to the window. The moon was full, casting silver light across the yard. She could see the corral, the barn, the windmill turning slowly in the breeze. And something else, a figure moving in the shadows near the barn. Clara's blood went cold. She grabbed the pistol from her nightstand and moved silently to the door. Her bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor as she crept down the hallway. Silas's door was open. His bed was empty. Her heart hammered in her chest. She continued to the front door and eased it open. The night air was cool on her skin. The smell of sage and dust filled her nostrils. She could hear the horses shifting nervously in the corral, and voices, low and angry, coming from behind the barn. Clara moved closer, keeping to the shadows. She peered around the corner. Silas stood facing three men. Victor was in the center, a pistol in his hand. Harrison and another man flanked him. "You should have stayed out of this, rancher," Victor was saying. "This was between me And Clara, you made it personal. Silas did not move. His hands were at his sides. Empty. She will be my wife, he said quietly. That makes it personal. Clara's breath caught. Wife. He had called her his wife. Victor laughed, a cold, cruel sound. Your wife, how touching. A mail-order bride who answered a letter written by a child. What a foundation for a marriage. He raised his pistol. Step aside, Brennan. I am taking what belongs to me. You can either let me pass, or you can die here in the dirt like the frontier trash you are. Silas did not step aside. She does not belong to you, he said. She never did. She belongs to herself, and she has chosen to stand with me. Victor's face twisted with rage. Then you can die together. He pulled back the hammer of his pistol. Clara stepped out of the shadows. Stop! Victor spun toward her. His eyes went wide. Clara stood in the moonlight, the pistol in her hands aimed directly at his chest. Put down the gun, Victor, she said. Her voice was steady, calm. The voice of a woman who had finally stopped running. Victor laughed again, but there was uncertainty in it now. You will not shoot me, Clara. You do not have it in you. You are right, Clara said. I do not want to kill you, but I will if I have to, because I am done being afraid. I am done letting you control my life. I am done being the victim. She took a step closer. You took everything from me once. My job, my reputation, my peace of mind. I let you do it because I believed I was worthless, because you made me believe I deserved it. Another step. But I know better now. I know what I am worth. I know what I have built, and I will not let you destroy it. Victor's face contorted with fury. You ungrateful little whore, he snarled. After everything I did for you. He swung his pistol toward her. Clara fired. The shot echoed across the valley like thunder. Victor stumbled backward, his hand clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. His pistol fell to the dirt. Harrison and the other man froze, looking between their wounded employer and the woman with the smoking gun. The next one will not miss, Clara said quietly. Leave, now, and never come back. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Harrison grabbed Victor under the arms and began dragging him toward their horses. The other man followed. This is not over. Victor gasped, his face twisted with pain and hatred. I will destroy you. I will destroy everything you love. Clara lowered the pistol. No, she said. You will not. She watched them ride away into the darkness. Then her legs gave out. Silas caught her before she hit the ground. He held her close, his arms strong and warm around her trembling body. You saved my life, he murmured into her hair. We saved each other, she whispered back. They stood there in the moonlight, holding each other, while the echoes of the gunshot faded into silence. It was over. This time it was truly over. Victor Ashford was captured 2 days later, trying to cross into Mexico. He was transported back to Tucson in chains. The trial was brief. The evidence was overwhelming. The testimony of the child he had abused, combined with Clara's account and the investigation into his father's corruption, sealed his fate. He was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Judge Ashford disgraced him broken, resigned from public life, and retreated to his estate in Virginia. The family name, once synonymous with power and influence, became synonymous with scandal and shame. Clara received word of the verdict via telegram on a crisp autumn morning. She read it twice, then folded the paper and tucked it into her pocket. Silas found her sitting on the porch watching Ethan chase chickens across the yard. Good news, he asked. The best, she said quietly. It is over. Truly over. Silas sat down beside her. For a long moment, they watched their son playing in the golden light. Then Silas spoke. I have been thinking, he said slowly, about something you said. The night Victor came. What did I say? Silas turned to look at her. His gray eyes were soft in a way she had rarely seen. You said forever, that you wanted us forever. I remember. Did you mean it? Clara felt her heart swell. Every word. Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver ring. Elizabeth's ring, the one he had shown her by the creek all those weeks ago. Then I think it is time, he said. Time to make it official. Clara looked at the ring. At this man who had lost so much and still found the courage to love again. At the life they had built together, brick by brick, day by day. Is that a proposal? She asked softly. It is, Silas said, if you will have me. Clara took the ring from his hand. It fit perfectly on her finger as if it had been made for her. I will, she said. I will have you, Silas Brennan, today and every day after. Silas smiled, a real smile, wide and bright, transforming his weathered face into something beautiful. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her long and deep while Ethan cheered from across the yard. The wedding was held by the creek beneath the oak tree with the heart carved into its trunk. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends, the minister from town, Sheriff Jenkins, Martha and Lily from the miners' camp, a few of the ranchers who had stood watch during the dark days of Victor's escape. Clara wore a simple linen dress that she had sewn herself, white with tiny blue flowers embroidered along the hem. Her hair was loose crowned with a circlet of wild lavender that Ethan had picked that morning. Silas wore a clean white shirt, the nicest thing he owned. His boots were polished. His hair was combed. He looked uncomfortable and handsome and utterly devoted. Ethan stood between them holding a sprig of lavender, his face shining with joy. The minister spoke the words, ancient words, sacred words, words that had joined countless couples before them and would join countless more after. Do you, Silas Brennan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health for richer or poorer, until death do you part? I do. Do you, Clara Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health for richer or poorer, until death do you part? Clara looked at Silas, at the man who had shown her what love could be, not possession, not control, but partnership, support, the choice to stand together day after day through whatever storms might come. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Arizona, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Silas cupped her face in his rough hands and kissed her gently, reverently, as if she were something precious beyond measure. Ethan threw his arms around both of them. Pa and Mama, he shouted. Now we are a real family. We always were, Clara whispered, hugging him tight. From the moment you wrote that letter. The sun set behind the mountains as they walked back to the house together. A family, whole at last. 1 year later, the Brennan Ranch had transformed. The house had a fresh coat of paint. The barn had been expanded. A new corral held horses that Silas had bred from the finest stock in the territory. Behind the house, a garden flourished with vegetables and flowers. Lavender grew in purple waves along the fence, filling the air with sweet fragrance. Chickens scratched in the yard. A fat orange cat dozed on the porch. The school in the miners' camp had been replaced by a proper building constructed by the town with funds raised from families across Copper Springs. It had real walls and a real roof and real desks for the children to sit at. A sign above the door read Whitmore School in letters that Ethan had helped paint. Clara still taught there every morning, but now she had help. 2 young women from town who had been her first students had become her assistants. The school had grown to serve 80 children, from the poorest miner's daughter to the richest rancher's son. Education, Clara always said, does not care about the size of your father's wallet. It only cares about the size of your dreams. On a warm summer evening, Clara sat on the porch with Silas, watching the sun sink toward the mountains. Ethan was playing in the yard, chasing fireflies with the pure joy of a child who had never known anything but love. Clara's hand rested on her belly, which had begun to swell with the promise of new life. Happy, Silas asked quietly. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. More than I ever thought possible. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The fear, the pain, the desperate flight across a continent, the letter from a lonely child that had changed everything. She thought about who she had been when she stepped off that train. Broken, afraid, certain that she would never be safe, never be loved, never belong anywhere. She thought about who she was now, a wife, a mother, a teacher, a woman who had built something meaningful from the ruins of her old life. Silas, she said softly. Yes, do you still have the letter, the one Ethan wrote? Silas smiled. Of course. Can I see it? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Soft with handling, creased in 100 places. I had it framed, he said. It hangs in the schoolroom, but I keep a copy with me always. Clara unfolded the paper and read those crooked words one more time. My pa is real sad. He does not smile anymore. Mama went to heaven and Pa forgot how to smile. I think he needs someone who can smile real big. If you come, maybe he will smile again. Tears pricked her eyes. He smiles now, she whispered. Because of you. No, Clara shook her head. Because of us. All three of us. We built this together. She folded the letter and handed it back to him. Silas tucked it into his pocket close to his heart. Ethan came running up, fireflies blinking in his cupped hands. Look, Mama. Look what a god, Clara knelt down to see. The tiny lights flickered against his palms like living stars. They are beautiful, she said. Can we keep them? Clara shook her head gently. Some things are not meant to be kept, sweetheart. Some things are meant to be set free. Ethan thought about this for a moment. Then he opened his hands and watched the fireflies drift away into the gathering darkness. Goodbye, he called after them. Thank you for letting me hold you. Clara felt fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. She gathered her son into her arms and held him close, breathing in the smell of sunshine and dust and childhood. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, Mama. Ethan pulled back and looked at her with those bright blue eyes. Are you crying? Happy tears, Clara said. Only happy tears. Silas's hand settled on her shoulder, warm and strong. Time to go inside, he said softly. Getting dark. Clara stood one hand in Ethan's, the other intertwined with Silas's. Together they walked into the house. The door closed behind them, shutting out the night. Inside, the lamps were lit. The fire crackled in the hearth. The smell of dinner drifted from the kitchen. Home. Real home. The kind that lasted forever. Clara looked around at the life she had built, at the man she loved, at the child who had brought them together, at the new life growing inside her. She had not been saved. She had been chosen, and she had chosen back. That made all the difference. In the schoolroom at the Brennan Ranch, a framed letter hung on the wall above the fireplace. The paper was old now, soft with age, the ink fading in places, but the words were still legible, still powerful, still a testament to the simple faith of a child who had believed that love could heal anything. My pa is real sad. He does not smile anymore. Mama went to heaven and Pa forgot how to smile. I think he needs someone who can smile real big. If you come, maybe he will smile again. I will be good. I know how to work. Ethan Brennan. Beneath the letter, in an adult's careful handwriting, someone had added a postscript. And she came. And she stayed. And we all learned to smile again. Years later, when people asked Clara about her life, she would tell them about the letter. She would tell them about a lonely boy who loved his father so much that he wrote to a stranger for help. She would tell them about a broken woman who had lost everything and found something better. She would tell them about a silent man who showed love through action when words failed him. She would tell them about a town that had judged her and then embraced her. She would tell them about a monster who had tried to destroy her and failed. And she would tell them about the family she had built. Not from blood, from choice, from love, from the simple, stubborn belief that everyone deserved a second chance. The girl who was called worthless, she would say, became a woman who showed hundreds of children their worth. The man who forgot how to feel learned to love again. And the boy who wrote a letter changed all their lives forever. That is the power of hope. That is the power of choice. That is the power of love. As the years passed, the Brennan family grew. A daughter was born that first winter. Sarah, they named her after Silas's mother. She had her father's gray eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. 2 years later, a son arrived. Thomas, called Tommy, who looked so much like Ethan that people often mistook them for twins despite the age difference. The ranch prospered. The school flourished. The town of Copper Springs grew from a dusty frontier outpost into a thriving community. And at the center of it all was the family that had been built from a letter, a leap of faith, and the courage to start again. Clara lived to see her children grow up, Mary have children of their own. She lived to see her students become teachers, doctors, lawyers, leaders. She lived to see the world change in ways she never could have imagined. But some things never changed. Every evening when the sun set behind the mountains, she would sit on the porch with Silas and watch the light fade from gold to purple to deep velvet blue. And every evening she would think about that day on the train platform. The fear, the uncertainty, the moment when a small boy had stepped forward and changed everything. She had come to Arizona looking for escape. She had found something infinitely better. She had found home. On the last page of Clara's journal, written many years later, in a hand that trembled with age but remained clear and strong, were these words. They say that home is where the heart is. But I have learned that home is something you build, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. It is not given. It is earned. It is not found. It is made. And once you have made it, once you have earned it, once you have chosen it with your whole heart, nothing and no one can take it away. I was lost when I came to Arizona, lost and broken and afraid. But a boy with a letter showed me the way. A man with a wounded heart showed me that love is possible even after loss. A town full of strangers showed me that community is built through action, not words. And I showed myself that I was stronger than I ever knew. This is my story. This is our story. And it has the only ending that matters. We lived, we loved, we chose each other again and again through every storm and every sunrise. And we were happy. The end.